Hey guys, working on chapter 5 today. Just wanted to say, hey, this looks familiar, right? This is our library. Kind of miss it, so figured that would be a good background for today. So yesterday, Buck was sold again to a family that's like not really prepared for this wild adventure in Canada and the Yukon, and they tip over a sleigh and all kinds of fun stuff. Oh, gusties. Okay, sorry. No, I don't have the virus. Allergies. All right, so picking up from yesterday. This accomplished the outfit. Though cut in half, was still a formidable bulk. Charles and Hal went out in the evening and bought in six outside dogs. These, added to the 6 of the original team, and Teak and Kuna, the Huskies obtained at the Rink Rapids on the record trip, brought the team up to 14. But the outside dogs, though practically broken in since their landing, did not amount to much. 3 were short-haired pointers. 1 was a Newfoundland, and the other 2 were mongrels of indeterminate breed. They did not seem to know anything, these newcomers. Buck and his comrades looked upon them with disgust, and though he speedily taught them their place and what not to do, he could not teach them what to do. They did not take kindly to trace and trail. With the exception of the 2 mongrels, they were bewildered and spirit-broken by the strange, savage environment in which they found themselves and by the ill treatment they had received. So this is a picture, I think, of the, let's see if we can get it there. This is impossible. There we go. It's hard to see, and I don't know which way. There we go. This is the sled being, good Lord, being tipped over in town. So that was yesterday. The 2 mongrels were without spirit at all. Bones were the only things breakable about them. With the newcomers hopeless and forlorn, and the old team worn out by 2,500 miles of continuous trail, the outlook was anything but bright. The 2 men, however, were quite cheerful, and they were proud too. They were doing the thing in style. With 14 dogs, they had seen other sleds depart over the pass for Dawson, or come in from Dawson, but never had they seen a sled with so many as 14 dogs. In the nature of Arctic travel, there was a reason why 14 dogs should not drag one sled, and that was that one sled could not carry the food for 14 dogs. But Charles and Hal did not know this. They worked the trip out with a pencil, so much to a dog. So many dogs, so many days. QED, Mercedes looked over her shoulder and nodded comprehensively. It was all so very simple. Late next morning, Buck led the long team up the street. There was nothing lively about it. No snap or get in him and his fellows. They were starting dead weary. 4 times he had covered the distance between Saltwater and Dawson, and the knowledge that, jaded and tired, he was facing the same trail once more made him bitter. His heart was not in the work, nor was his heart the heart of any dog. The outsides were timid and frightened. The insides were without confidence in their master. Buck felt vaguely that there was no depending upon these 2 men and woman. They did not know how to do anything, and as the days went by, it became apparent that they could not learn. They were slack in all things, without order or discipline. It took them half the night to pitch a slovenly camp, and half the morning to break that camp and get the sled loaded in fashion so slovenly that for the rest of the day they were occupied in stopping and rearranging the load. Some days they did not make 10 miles. On other days they were unable to get started at all, and on no day did they succeed in making more than half the distance used by the men as a basis in their dog food computations. It was inevitable that they should go short on dog food, but they hastened it by overfeeding, bringing the day nearer when underfeeding would commence. The outside dog, whose digestions had not been trained by chronic famine to make the most of little, had voracious appetites. And when, in addition to this, the worn-out huskies pulled weakly, Hal decided that the orthodox ration was too small. He doubled it. And to cap it all, when Mercedes, with tears in her pretty eyes and a quavering in her throat, could not cajole him into giving the dogs still more, she stole from the fish sacks and fed them slyly. But it was no food that Buck and the Huskies needed, but rest. And though they were making poor time, the heavy load they dragged sapped their strength severely. Then came the underfeeding. Hal awoke one day to the fact that his dog food was half gone, and the distance only quarter covered. Further, that for love or money, no additional dog food was to be obtained. So he cut down even the orthodox ration and tried to increase the day's travel. His sister and brother-in-law seconded him, but they were frustrated by their heavy outfit and their own incompetence. It was a simple matter to give the dogs less food, but it was impossible to make the dogs travel faster. While their own inability to get over way earlier in the morning prevented them from traveling longer hours, not only did they not know how to work the dogs, but they did not know how to work themselves. The first to go was Dub, poor blundering thief that he was, always getting caught and punished. He had nonetheless been a faithful worker. His wrenched shoulder blade, untreated and unrested, went from bad to worse, till finally Hal shot him with the big Colt revolver. It was the saying of country that the outside dog starves to death on the ration of the husky. So the 6 outside dogs under Buck could do no less than die on half the rations of the husky. The Newfoundland went first, followed by the 3 short-haired pointers, the 2 mongrels hanging more grittily on to life, but going in the end. So all those dogs died. Ridiculous. By this time, all the amenities and gentleness of the Southland had fallen away from the 3 people. Shorn of its glamour and romance, Arctic travel became, to them, a reality too harsh for their womanhood and manhood. Mercedes ceased weeping over the dogs, being too occupied with weeping over herself and with quarreling with her husband and brother. To quarrel was the one thing they were never too weary to do. Their irritability arose only of their misery, increased with it. Their irritability arose out of their misery, increased with it, doubled upon it, outdistanced it. The wonderful patience of the trail, which comes to men who toil hard and suffer sore and remain sweet of speech and kindly, do not come to these 2 men and the woman. They had no inkling of such a patience. They were stiff and in pain. Their muscles ached and their bones ached. Their very hearts ached, and because of this, they became sharp of speech, and hard words were first on their lips in the morning and last at night. Charles and Hal wrangled whenever Mercedes gave them a chance. It was the cherished belief of each that he did more than his share of the work, and neither forbore to speak this brief at every opportunity. Sometimes Mercedes sided with her husband, sometimes with her brother. The result was a beautiful and an unending family quarrel, starting from a dispute as to which should chop a few sticks for the fire, a dispute which concerned only Charles and Hal. Presently would be lugged to the rest of the family, fathers, mothers, uncles, cousins, people thousands of miles away, and some of them dead, that Hal's view on art or the sort of society plays his mother's brothers wrote should have anything to do with the chopping of a few sticks of firewood passes comprehension. Nevertheless, the quarrel was as likely to tend in that direction as in the direction of Charles's political prejudices, and that Charles' sister's tale-bearing tongue should be relevant to the building of a Yukon fire was apparent only to Mercedes, who disburdened herself of copious opinions upon that topic, and incidentally upon a few other traits unpleasantly peculiar to her husband's family. In the meantime, the fire remained unbuilt, the camp half-pitched, and the dogs unfed. Mercedes nursed a special grievance, the grievance of her sex. She was pretty and soft and had been chivalrously treated all her days, but the present treatment by her husband and brother was everything save chivalrous. It was her custom to be helpless, They complained, upon which impeachment of what to her was her most essential sex prerogative, she made their lives unendurable. She no longer considered the dogs, and because she was sore and tired, she persisted in riding on the sled. She was pretty and soft, but she weighed 120 pounds, a lusty last straw to the load dragged by the weak and starving animals. She rode for days, till they fell in the traces and the sled stood still. Charles and Hal begged her to get off and walk, pleaded with her, entreated, to the while she wept and importuned heaven was with a recital of their brutality. I'm sorry, I did not read that well. On one occasion, they took her off the sled by main strength. They never did it again. She let her legs go limp like a spoiled child and sat down on the trail. They went on their way, but she did not move. After they had traveled 3 miles, they unloaded the sled, came back for her, and by main strength put her on the sled again. In the excess of their own misery, they were callous to the suffering of their animals. Hal's theory, which he practiced on others, was that one must be hardened. He had started out preaching it to his sister and brother-in-law. Failing there, he hammered it into the dogs with a club. At the 5 fingers, the dog food gave out, and a toothless old squaw offered to trade them a few pounds of frozen horsehide for the Colt revolver that kept the big hunting knife company at Hal's hip. A poor substitute for food was this hide, just as it had been stripped from the starved horses of the cattlemen 6 months back. In its frozen state, it was more like strips of galvanized iron, and when a dog wrestled it into his stomach, it thawed into thin and innutritious leathery strings and into a mass of short hair, irritating and indigestible. All right, we're going to stop there. Tomorrow we'll finish chapter 5. We'll see you guys tomorrow.